Hi there, everyone. Welcome. See, folks are flooding in. That's great. We'll get started in just a moment. Welcome to the webinar tonight. We are going to start in just a minute. While we wait for people to come on in, feel free to use the chat and introduce yourself. We'd love to know your name, where you're from. If you'd like to share your pronouns, you can. You can even rename yourself, as I have, to share your pronouns if you're comfortable with it. But feel free to do that in the chat while we wait for folks to come on in. Thanks for joining us tonight. For those who are new to Zoom, probably most of us are all too familiar with Zoom, but the chat is at the bottom. It's a little speech bubble. So chat, you click on that and it should pop up a little box, allow you to say hello. I see some more folks have joined us. So for those just joining, welcome. Thanks for joining us tonight. We are going to get started in a couple more minutes. In the meantime, please feel free to say hello in the chat box. Let us know your name, where you're from. If you'd like to share your pronouns, you're certainly invited to do so if you feel comfortable. And we'd love to get to know you. So feel free to do that. We'll get started in just a bit more. Oh, this is great. I see folks from all over the place. Very cool. This is always very exciting for me. I'm an immigrant, so this is how I learn geography of my adopted country. Very cool. I see folks from Toronto to Toronto. See folks from Orange, California. That's great. In Hamilton, Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee lands. Kelowna. Boston, Massachusetts, and Pawtucket land. Great. All over. Halifax, Dupuktuk, that's great, in Nova Scotia. In the Okanagan territories. Wow, this is great. I see some more folks have joined us, so we're going to get started in, what time is it? We'll get started in about 1 more minute. In the meantime, please feel free to say hello, introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love to know where you're writing in from. And if you want to share your pronouns, you're more than welcome to do so. Great. Wow, lots of people here tonight. Over 200 attendees. That's fantastic. Fantastic turnout. All right, great. Yeah, all over the place. Great, fantastic. Cool. Well, I want to say thanks to everyone for joining us. I think we're going to get started here. Yeah, let's get started. So thanks for joining the Defund Coastal GasLink webinar tonight. Really appreciate you joining us for this and for being part of this campaign. We're going to talk about a few different things, but tonight, the big purpose of the call here is to invite you to participate in taking some action against the banks and the equity giants who are investing in the Coastal GasLink pipeline in violation of Wet'suwet'en hereditary title. Before we dive into all the nitty-gritty, I do want to just acknowledge that we are all calling in from all across the land, is often called Canada and the United States, which is the traditional territories of many peoples, Indigenous peoples and nations. I'm in Toronto, in Canada, and this is the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is currently home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant. The land you call home is also traditional territory of Indigenous people. If you know the history of your land, this is an opportune time to pause and reflect on that heritage. And if you don't, this website, native-land.ca, is an excellent resource for learning more about the people who made their homes on the land you currently share, both before the invasion by European settlers and to this day. In acknowledging the history of the land, certain consequences are revealed. Any acknowledgement of the land we share must be accompanied by an acknowledgement of the invasion that brought us to be here today, which is an invasion that displaced entire nations and sought to destroy entire cultures in the pursuit of stolen wealth. Any acknowledgement of the land we now call home must, in 2021, 6 years after the publication in Canada of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's report, not only acknowledge that historical and ongoing legacy of violence and our complicity in reaping the benefits of it, but must also be a call to action to put a halt to that violence. That struggle is our shared struggle. That violence is ongoing and that invasion continues. What we're going to talk about tonight is armed force that is still being deployed to force Indigenous people off their land. Machines of war are still used to seize resources for extraction on unceded territory. The might and power of the government is still drafted into service to suppress, occupy, and steal Indigenous territory. The invasion continues today. This campaign is to defend our planet and to deliver justice for all. This campaign is also to rise in solidarity with generations of land defenders who came before us and those land defenders today who are carrying that work forward. That work is our work. This can only occur within a framework that prioritizes justice for Indigenous peoples. This work can only deliver the future we need if we guarantee that future is shared equitably with those from whom so many futures have already been sought to be stolen. If we are not explicit about that commitment, then we resign ourselves to being complicit in that theft. There is no climate action without climate justice and Indigenous sovereignty. That is the acknowledgement we need to make. So with that in mind, let's get into the work of it. The Zoom platform that we're using tonight, we're using the webinar mode tonight. So some of this stuff is not going to apply exactly the same, but I believe you still can choose a speaker view on the top right of your screen if you'd rather change the way you perceive the slides. We do have a transcription function, which is available to you. There should be a button at the bottom of your screen that says live transcript if you would like captioning. I will note that the captioning is automated. It is not perfect, certainly better than nothing. It's pretty good, but it's quite Anglo-centric. So it doesn't do well with some of the non-Anglo names, but it does provide some captioning for you. So you can turn that on by using that live transcript button. We also have the Q&A function. So there will be a Q&A section. If you have questions to direct to the speakers tonight, they will be addressed at the end. You can use that Q&A function to enter them, and that is how the speakers will select them. We have asked you to introduce yourself in the chat with your name and your pronouns if you're comfortable, and where you're calling it from. Now that most of you have done that, we are going to turn the chat to a different mode so that it's not distracting, and so that if anyone is using a screen reader, they're able to hear what we're talking about with our speakers. So Alec, if you want to go ahead and turn the chat setting. If you need support, you'll still be able to message tech support using the direct messaging in the chat. Great. Our agenda tonight. So we'll do a quick welcome. We'll give you some background on the situation so you're fully versed in that. We've got some fantastic speakers to get you informed and fired up. And then we'll talk about the work, the week of action that's happening next week, and how you can be part of making a difference and making this campaign successful. So I am very excited to have some excellent and inspiring speakers here tonight to help us understand the context in which this campaign is unfolding. But before we turn the floor over to them, we do want to share a short video from the front lines of climate destruction. And for a little context, on October 19th of this year, the Gidimt'en clan of the Wet'suwet'en put out a letter to the investors of the coastal GasLink pipeline, calling on them to divest from CGL. In this video, you'll see Gidimt'en spokesperson Slado addressing investors of CGL. We're going to go ahead and share that video now. Ellen, I don't have a feed on that yet. Sorry. There you go.
If you choose to invest your money in a project that is committing genocide on Indigenous people and lands, you will lose. We want all the investors of the Coastal GasLink pipeline project to know that this is a bad investment. This project has run over budget because they have not gained the consent of the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs. This project will not have a favorable financial outcome. You have to stop and cut your losses while you can.
I'll turn on my unmute myself. I can hear me better. Thanks for that, Evelyn. And with that, I'd like to turn things over to our first speaker, Yves Saint, to share the impact of destructive endeavors on frontline communities. Yves is a Wet'suwet'en land defender, organizer, public speaker, one of the 4 Indigenous land defenders arrested on February 7th of 2020 at Godimson Checkpoint, which helped spark the Shut Down Canada movement as a nation and other parts of the world, with actions of blocking highways, borders, and railways. Yves is part of the Godimson Checkpoint financial campaign team. She is based in Toronto, Ontario. Thanks, Yves.
Thanks, Tim. Hello, hi, everybody. I'm Yves, and I am super excited to be here, and I am over ecstatic with everyone joining us tonight. This really means a lot to myself and also people on the front line. So I just kind of wanted to start off giving a little bit of background information on a little bit of the history between Coastal GasLink and Wet'suwet'en Land Defenders. Quick summary for those who may not know the full story. Okay, so let's just start off. I would like to acknowledge, I always love to acknowledge those who have done this hard work for such a long time. And one of my sheroes, Freda Houston. And so Freda Houston and her family has been fighting industry and extraction and pipelines for over 10 years. And so her territory in Untitled, they belong to a clan and a house. And so if people aren't familiar, Freda has a healing center on her territory. She has a village. She lives there. Her and her family live there, and they have been giving no consent to these extraction industries for, like I said, over 10 years. And being there and reclaiming the land just tells other companies that no, there's no consent. And so with the big argument with hereditary chief system, which have full jurisdiction and is also recognized under the Canada Supreme Court, is that Canada recognizes that Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs never gave up their land, never gave up their rights, and that they have total governance over their traditional lands. And so Freda and her family and the hereditary chief Netibis are exercising their every right, their every inherent right. And this goes on, this right and this governance is older than Canada. And so in the past few years, Coastal GasLink has not gotten proper consent over getting permission to go through the territories, and they consulted with the chief and band council that signed on across the pipeline that starts at Kitimat and goes to Dawson City. And so that's about the width of all of so-called British Columbia in the interior. And so they haven't properly gotten the consent of the hereditary chiefs. And also, like, there is division in the community, as some of you have might see. But the thing is that the hereditary chiefs that parts of this pipeline is going through, they do not give their consent. And so, like, Netibis, Chief Was of the Cassia territory, which Godimson Checkpoint, the camp is on, they give no consent of these pipelines going through. And so it's been in the court system for a few years. And we have experienced our third year of our CMP raids. I was in the one of 2020, February 7th. I was arrested at Godimson Checkpoint. And I'll just say that this year, like, it was really hard to see my family and my Indigenous kin go through the same thing. So I just wanted to kind of give a little bit of a background of what's going on, especially needing your solidarity and support right now. Molly has called for a week of action, December 20th, and I'm so excited that everybody came to join us, because you know what, the time is now. It is very critical, especially with what just happened in the recent raids on Wet'suwet'en territories. Like, this is the third year in a row, and we have to hold these big financial banks responsible. Now, see, this is the image. These are images of what it looks like to it's like to assert your Wet'suwet'en title for hereditary chiefs, or even like Mali or Wet'suwet'en people. This is what we're met with. We're met with colonial violence. We're met with guns. We're met with SWAT teams, K9 units, bomb squads in high numbers. And so I like to say that this pipeline project is illegal, because they did not get proper consent through the hereditary chief system. And they keep on criminalizing us for being on our own lands. And even just interacting with Molly or Chief Was or any of the hereditary chiefs or Wet'suwet'en members, the people are met with disrespect, like a total utter disrespect. And it's very infuriating. I'm part of the financial team with Get 'em Done Checkpoint. And yes, we recently gave all the 36 investors of the Coastal GasLink project a letter to cease and desist and divest from Coastal GasLink. And we got a response. Actually, I'm part of the Canadian Banks Network, and we planned a day of action against RBC. We decided to target RBC as one of the big five banks that invest in these projects. And this is where we have to hit them. And they hold the money, they hold the power, and now we have to turn our focus and target these big banks. And so we had a day of action, October 29th, and all across the board, like some of you have been involved and or may have seen it on social media. And like, I was on the front line at the time, and I'll tell you that it was so powerful. And it also meant a lot to people on the ground to know that they are supported, because it also, the day of action was also focused around RBC violating Indigenous rights, such as the Wet'suwet'en resistance and Coastal GasLink. And so everybody on the ground was just ecstatic. And so after the day of action in November, RBC replied back in a letter, and that's on the Into Access website. That's on all the social medias. We just like released all the information last week, and it was such a disrespect to the hereditary chiefs, to Chief Was, to Slato, Molly. And I mean, like, they didn't want to take responsibility. They said they respect Indigenous sovereignty and rights, and that like they couldn't even sign it as a person, as a real life person, like David McKay or Kathleen Taylor, who's like a chair, CEO, or no, David McKay is the CEO. Anyway, so we just were enraged and decided to like go back after them. And so this day and age, especially right now with the fires in the same province. And 3 months ago, BC sees a lot of forest fires, and Layton, was burnt down to the ground. And then just recently, last month, we see the floods happening. So we're in it. We're in climate disaster, and the time is now. And this is a good time to strike. This is a good time to target investors like RBC and all of them that have the power to divest. We do not need any more pipelines, especially like through Wet'suwet'en territory, because they want to make that an energy corridor. So if this pipeline goes through, LNG, northern so-called, I always say this, so-called BC, but LNG, northern BC will happen, the terminal in Kitimat. And then also like other pipelines are just waiting to get through those territories. So there's a lot of reasons why to stand up, and it's also to back our Indigenous land defenders who have like worked so hard to throw down for us, who put their lives on the line for us, right? For the future generations. They're not discriminating like who they're throwing down for. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the skin color. It doesn't matter what species. This was for the good of humanity and life for the next 7 generations. And so I think we have the power right now to show them solidarity the way that they threw down for us, and that we have power to do that too as well. We have a voice, we have a body, we have tools and resources that we have. And of course, the violation of Wet'suwet'en and Indigenous rights. These extraction companies keep on violating, like Line 3, we have Fairy Creek happening, we have the Trans Mountain Pipeline Expansion Project and the Tiny House Warriors. So I think those are very important to back Indigenous leadership, especially because all these extraction companies go through our territories, right? You want to fight climate justice? Get behind Indigenous resistance. Join us, stand with us. Do what we can. We have to push the envelope. We have to use and harness this energy. And also, I always say this, it's very important with the climate state we're in. It's very critical. And I mean, you know, maybe you might not like think the other reasons are as important, but we are in a climate shift and a climate like crisis, and we all need to get behind that, and we all need to support each other, whether you know, we don't all have to get along, we don't all have to like each other, but we all have to live here. And so I just really wanted to put that out there and thank everyone for their solidarity. And let's really move forward and do what we can to hold these big investment, these big, huge financial institutions accountable. And I'm very excited. I'm very hopeful to see where this goes and what we can do. And I mean, every time we get up, every time we stand together, we are more powerful, and they can't ignore us. So I just would like to thank you, and thank you for your time. I believe I talked about, yes, the investor letter. Sorry, I'm just going like I have a thing in my head. Oh, and just a shout out to all my Indigenous kin who are here. I love you and appreciate you here. And yeah, okay, I like to pass it on.
Thanks, Yves. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate you joining us and all your hard work, and really proud to be rising alongside you in this fight. Glad to be part of this with you. Great. And so thanks for joining us, Yves. And our next speaker is Amy Gray, who is a senior climate finance strategist at Stand.Earth and is here to speak about the connection between finance, climate chaos, and CGL and its investors. Amy is a former organizer at 350.org, 350 Colorado, and Stop the Money Pipeline, and is an expert in organizing mass mobilizations and forming diverse coalitions. She's a trainer in anti-oppression and intersectional climate justice organizing and is passionate about divestment and climate finance. She was the recipient of the 2020 Climate Warrior Award from the El Paso County Democratic Party for her work on decommissioning the coal plants in El Paso County, Colorado. Amy, thanks for joining us.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. I want to talk a little bit about who is funding CGL. So if we could go to the next slide. So these are the 25 banks that are funding CGL, and we've done a lot of research on some of these banks, and our two big targets, well, we'll call it three, is RBC in Canada. RBC is the largest bank in Canada and is one of the biggest funders of the Coastal GasLink pipeline. And in the US, we're targeting Chase, JP Morgan Chase, and KKR. And for a little bit of context on how much money they have in these projects, the reason we're targeting RBC is that they have 85 million shares in TC Energy. So they own about 8.6%. That means that they have over $1 billion invested in the company. They are also helping to finance the project itself, which honestly makes them doubly exposed. Not only do they finance TC Energy, but they invest in them. And for comparison, we target Chase in the United States because we know Chase is one of the biggest funders of fossil fuels in the world. And Chase has 11.2 million shares in TC Energy. So a lot less than RBC, but awful nonetheless. So that's about 659.5 million, and they have a loan to TC Pipelines. That's how they're funding the project. It's not TC Energy, the parent corporation, but to one of their subsidiaries, TC Pipelines. RBC and Chase could stop the violation of Indigenous rights tomorrow simply by pulling its funding for the Coastal GasLink project. Yet both of these banks continue to believe that a pipeline transporting fracked gas overseas is more important than averting the climate crisis and respecting Indigenous sovereignty. The $6.6 billion CGL project remains a really high risk investment, and it faces increasing economic uncertainty, particularly in light of recent reports from the International Panel on Climate Change and the International Energy Agency, both of whom have concluded that further fossil fuel expansion exacerbates climate change. Furthermore, in recent months, the financial disputes around CGL have emerged as the construction costs balloon and delays increase. We know that the financial case for CGL is weakening, and there are no local economic benefits, particularly in the long term. All of these things are dwindling, and this really means that the business case for this project is not rock solid, and it's important to continuously call out these banks. So we are calling on all the banks, not only RBC and JP Morgan Chase, to divest and withdraw investment in the CGL project immediately. And continued investment in this project is an open violation of Wet'suwet'en Canadian and international law. And in no way is Coastal GasLink a responsible, profitable, secure, or morally sound investment. It's really important when we think about the financial case for this. Like, I know it sounds boring, finance can sound boring, but we try to really make it accessible to all of our organizers. And it's important to sway the public perception around these banks because Wet'suwet'en rights and title are being infringed upon by the construction of this pipeline. The banks and TC Energy have absolutely no respect for Indigenous communities or the climate crisis. And it's important that everyone understands where their money is impacting real people in real communities. They can't be allowed to continue to ravage our planet and communities with no consequences. Brand damage and divestment by consumers from these institutions is a real, tangible way to inflict these consequences and to hold the banks accountable. This is why it's so important when you hold your actions in your community to target these banks, target RBC in Canada, target in the United States, JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Citi. And if you're in one of these other countries, there are banks that are funding this as well. And in the chat, we're going to share a few ways that you can take action right away, thanks to tech support for sharing the petitions. One is to RBC executives demanding that they stop funding CGL. And the second one is to JP Morgan Chase and KKR. So thank you so much and help us divest CGL.
Thanks so much, Amy. Really appreciate you sharing those and your knowledge. You know, I'm not the biggest fan of capitalism, but we got to deal with it for at least a little while longer. And it's really important that we understand the financial underpinning of these projects. So thanks for bringing your wisdom and knowledge on that to it. Great. I'm going to pass it off now to Jackie Fielder for our last speaker. Jackie Fielder is a citizen of the 3 affiliated tribes in North Dakota and a communications coordinator with Stop the Money Pipeline. She is based in San Francisco. Thanks, Jackie.
Hey everyone, good to be on here. Thank you for being here, and thanks to our organizers and speakers. I'm Jackie Fielder. I'm with Stop the Money Pipeline. Have had the honor of working with Stop the Money Pipeline for the past 7 months or so. We are also hosting this webinar, but basically I'm on here to explain that it's really important that we show cross-nation solidarity. You know, the border is obviously a construction of settler colonialism. And as Indigenous peoples, we know that an injustice to one of us spells disaster for everyone. And even though this project is way up, maybe for some of us, and somewhere we've never been, or we can't even really point to on a map, being based here in so-called California on Métis land, it seems very far away. But the truth is that just as with our money system, our climate, as people pointed out earlier, is all interrelated. And if you know the Stop the Money Pipeline Coalition, you know that we've been working in solidarity this past year with the Line 3 frontline organizers and the GNU Collective. We've also been able to support Rise St. James and their fight in Southeast Louisiana against the Formosa plastics plant. But all of this is to say that just because we don't have an immediate familial connection to this land or this particular fight, this today and this webinar is your invitation to be connected. We all know what's at stake, the future of our planet, the future generations, but really importantly, it's really a connection that is sacred between another Indigenous peoples and their land. And it's really going to be difficult to face down the atrocities of climate change and the entire fossil-based economy without returning to Indigenous wisdom and Indigenous leadership when it comes to relationships with the land. And so as much as this is a finance movement, it is also a solidarity movement for Indigenous rights and their rights to free, fair, and informed consent. I'll leave you all with just the invitation to continue educating ourselves about this fight that's been going on for a long time. And I know I and myself and the folks at Stop the Money Pipeline will continue to be doing that and seeing how we can make the connections and continue to show solidarity. But wherever you are, there are banks near us that are invested in this project. And so encourage you all to keep following, and thank you all so much for attending today.
Hey, thanks so much, Jackie. Appreciate it. And really glad you raised the urgent necessity of building an international coalition. And coalitions are not easy. I'm not gonna lie to you, it's tough. It's hard work. You're gonna encounter people who have different ideas, who don't agree about 100% of the things. Solidarity is a verb. You gotta build those connections, build those relationships, build that trust, and rise up in support of each other. And that is part of what we're doing tonight, and part of what we're doing as a movement, and the only way we're gonna win it. So really glad to have you share that. Thank you. Great. So with that in mind, we're getting to the part where we talk about some of the actions you can take to be part of this proposal that we have, this campaign idea that we have. We have an opportunity here, which is that the Gidimt'en is building pressure on investors of the CGL pipeline, drawing public attention to the role that they play. And in the case of RBC here in Canada, we're even beginning to see some level of engagement from them on this issue. It's not great engagement. They're mad, but it's engagement. They know, they're aware of this. And CGL is struggling financially with cost overruns. We know corporations like RBC and Chase and KKR are sensitive to their public image and susceptible to public pressure. You see all this greenwashing announcements they make because they know they've got to cover their backs. And we know they're feeling that pressure as we watch them roll out those announcements. So this is why we are calling for a week of action on the week of December 20th, which you'll recognize as next week, to sustain pressure on investor targets. Investors need to know that they are never off the hook. We will continue to maintain pressure, even right up until their holidays. More than that, this week of action will help to maintain pressure and sustain momentum so it carries through into the new year. We're not going away. Through this week, we hope to tap into a major global campaign that's looking to the finances behind fossil fuels and contribute to the movement that is centering frontline communities supported by settler climate activists. So how do we do that? I see your comment, Eve, and I'm sure you can. So how do we do that? First, we tell the truth about what companies like RBC, Chase, and KKR are doing. We tell a story that clearly connects them to the climate crisis and Indigenous rights violations. We make our demands clear that these companies must defund CGL and respect free, prior, and informed consent. We hold actions across so-called Canada and the US to draw attention to the issue. And one last point, look, they know that they're gonna have to stop. They know that fossil fuels are dying. They know that there's gonna come a point where it's no longer worth it. And they're making a calculation that they can ride it out and get that last little bit of profit until it's almost too late and then duck out at the last minute. Our job is to change that calculus. Our job is to make sure they know that they've already missed that point, that it's already too late and it's time to get out and cut their losses. What we have put together is a resource kit. And so we're going to put a sign up form in the chat. And what I'm going to ask you to do in a second here is to just fill out that form. It's very short. It's a couple questions just so we can get in contact with you. When you fill that out, it lets us know that you're ready to take action with us. And we will follow up with a toolkit and a way to register an action near you for any time next week. You'll have a social media toolkit to share. You'll have art and graphics to use. You'll have everything you need for successful action. I know the link's in there now, so I'm going to ask you to just click the link in the chat and start to fill that out. It won't take you long. And while you do, I want you to think about why you joined the call tonight, why you're part of this movement. I don't want to speak for any of you. For me, I'm here because I want to see change. I want to make a difference. I'm going to be part of the solution. For 20 years before I got into all this stuff, I was a rave DJ and I loved it. It's great. And if I could still be out flying around, throwing parties, I'd do it. But I can't. I can't because there's important things that need to be solved. We're living in a crisis that has to take priority. I want to build a world where people can do those kinds of things, pursue art and create music without the threat of armed force being deployed to get them off their land, without the threat of climate collapse looming over our heads. I learned about the climate crisis for the first time, I don't know, it's probably like 8th grade. You know, it was in the 90s. And it's been a long time since then. And not only has it not been solved, it's worse. We've known about this. We've inherited this problem. It has to stop now. We can't let it go on to another generation. It's up to us. Nobody else is coming to save us. It's up to you. It's not going to be solved overnight. We got to be real about that. But it is going to be solved. And it's going to be solved by people just like you, just like me, just like all of us, taking these kinds of discrete actions over time and as part of a global movement. And we have a lot of power behind us. There's a lot of us. And there's a lot of passion and care and energy behind us. And there is a spiritual and moral element to it. We are on the side of righteousness and justice. You know that. You know that in your heart. And you're here because you know that. You're here because you feel that. You're here because you care about that. We can get this done. So I'm asking you to fill that out, get the link, get involved, set up an action, get ready to work to save the world, at least a little bit. Really appreciate y'all taking the time to hear from our speakers, to be a part of this call. I know we are going to open it up for some Q&A. I'm going to give it one last pitch, though. If you haven't signed up yet, please do. Please do. You came here tonight because you wanted to get involved. This is how you get involved. This is what you do. You take action together. It is collective action. It is working together that puts the fear of God into them, that makes them afraid, that makes them recalculate their balance sheets, that makes them think, okay, actually, we've miscalculated. It's time to cut our losses. It's time to get out. That's what's going to do it. Great. Thanks so much, everyone. Evelyn, I'm going to pass over to you to handle the Q&A.
Hi, everyone. My name is Evelyn. So I am just popping in here. I'm an organizer with Banking on a Better Future based out of Toronto in so-called Canada. And I'm just going to bounce some questions that we've been getting in the Q&A to some of the panelists here. And I think the first one that might be an important one to do some clarifying on is a question from Robin, if I can just find it. Robin, I was calling for Lead Now last night, and a question I got was, why does the hereditary chiefs wants supersede what the band chiefs want? Aren't they elected officials? The hereditary chiefs were given the title. And I think that this is an important one to address because the sort of the dynamic between the hereditary chiefs and the band council has been, I think, a question, some sort of a question mark for some folks. So I'm wondering if maybe Yves, you would want to sort of touch on what the difference is there and why it's important to give the hereditary chiefs or to respect the hereditary title there.
Hey, I'll just unmute myself. Yeah, the difference. Okay, so the difference is that like the Wet'suwet'en traditional governance system, the clan, the houses, they govern. Hereditary chiefs are not elected. They have to earn their name. They're like groomed from a young age to be out on the land, to know the language, to know what's best for the people. And the focus is for the hereditary chiefs are to think of the land and to think of the future generations. And so their decision making and everything that they do is has to have those values and thoughts in mind, as opposed to the chief in band council, especially in so-called Canada, definitely in the US too, obviously, but they are built by a structure built by the Canadian government. And this structure restricts us. It keeps us on the reserves. It keeps us not getting ahead. If we leave our lands, we get no rights, or like we have to pay taxes, which is only one tax, but it's like super weird. So we don't get free tax or don't pay taxes. That's a myth. But I just want to clarify that. But so that's the difference. So the chief and council obviously is that structure. It's set up to like restrict us, and also restricts our funds. It's, yeah, like it's a really hard system to get out under. And so the hereditary chief system, that's where the Wet'suwet'en and also the neighboring nation, the Gigsan, they took Canada to court and said that they didn't like give up their lands, it's unceded, and they didn't give up their rights and title because their governance system is still intact till this very day. And this system, this traditional governance system, is older than Canada. So before Canada, before the first settlers came, or any colonization, we had the Wet'suwet'en traditional governance in place. And so the Supreme Court of Canada recognizes that. And so that they said, yes, the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs do have title over their lands. And so this is where it gets, the difference is that, you know, and then also there are hereditary chiefs that have lost their way or don't, you know, it's a system that needs to like be have work on with the nation too as well. But the people, the hereditary chiefs that do not want this pipeline going through their territories, like they are exercising their inherent right and their governance and their title and their sovereignty. And so that's the difference. That's the argument. And yeah. And that's why CGL is illegal. That's why Canada is doing this illegally. That's why the RCMP is doing all this illegally. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that, for clarifying that. And I want to uplift, I think what Teresa had put in the Q&A as well, that the Band Council comes out of the Indian Act and it does not give the council authority over the lands. So yeah, this is what we're here tonight for, is about respecting that hereditary title and respecting traditional law. So the next question I wanted to bounce maybe to Tim, if that's okay with you. Are there specific actions you encourage customers to do at these banks? I understand that you want the public to associate these banks with the violence they are creating. Is there anything else customers can do?
That's a great question. Thanks, Evelyn. Yeah. So we did a day of action outside of banks about a month and a half ago on this campaign, and had a lot of success engaging with customers and with employees. The name of the game is visibility and making sure that the people at the top get the message. And some of the most effective ways that we found to do that were to have very visible rallies, and rally may be too strong a word, but just gatherings outside of bank branches, where people could either hand out flyers to customers on their way in, could get some visibility with signs, and crucially, get some photos to share on social media, tag the banks in question. And we even included a little press kit. And I think, Evelyn, I don't know if we have this or not, but you can copy it and use it again, which hosts of these events would send out to local media to get a little coverage. And, you know, it's tough to get coverage in the Globe and Mail or the Toronto Star, and certainly National Post isn't going to cover us. But a lot of these local media outlets love content like this. They're looking for content. There's just not as much happening at the local level. So they eat it up. And we get a lot of great coverage out of those events. And the last thing is that talking to the employees there, and I really want to stress, the employees at the front line are not your enemy. It is not an adversarial engagement with those folks. They're just trying to survive just like the rest of us. But they are inside the machine. And they got a boss, and their boss has a boss, and that message does trickle up. And we found a lot of success there in talking to those employees. Some of them just want to do their job. Some of them are allies. Some of them are surprised to find that their bank is so invested in these kinds of projects. Letting them know that and asking them to pass that message up the chain, it resonates. It gets through. So a lot of opportunities with those kinds of actions. And there is a toolkit. When you sign up on that form, you will get a toolkit that gives you some ideas and gives you a step-by-step guide on making these things a reality. Even in the timeline we have, there's just every kind of piece of information you need there and a way to get support if you need it.
Thank you. So I just want to address something that's in the Q&A. How do I know that giving my info away is safe? I'm assuming that this is referring to the sign up form. So I just want to like reassure people that we're not going to be sharing that info anywhere. It won't go anywhere else besides getting the materials that you need to you. But if you're not comfortable for whatever reason, like that's totally all right. That's your decision. And it's okay. Like you don't have to feel like you have to fill in personal info if you're not comfortable doing that. A question that I wanted to address, and I'm not sure who the best person is. I'm wondering if it might be Amy. Someone asked, can you speak more to the coalition that's coordinating this work so far? Maybe Amy or Yves, if either of you would want to jump in on that one.
Sure. This is actually, it's quite a big coalition. Stand.Earth is here tonight with Get Them Checkpoint, Lead Now, Stop the Money Pipeline. And this is, all of us are part of what is a really big Canadian banks coalition, Greenpeace Canada, lots of different groups and lots of people are represented in that space. And then we all are members of Stop the Money Pipeline, which is a US-based coalition of over 150 organizations who work on climate finance. So it's cross-border, it's very large, and pretty much, you know, anybody working in climate finance is either part of Stop the Money Pipeline or part of the Canadian Banks Coalition. And I'll put my email in the chat if you are part of an organization who wants to join one of these coalitions, whether it's Stop the Money Pipeline in the US or the Canadian Banks Coalition. I'll share my email and get you introduced to our group.
Thank you. So I want to then jump to a question around why now. So Quentin, apologies if I'm mispronouncing that, has asked in the chat, I'm new to organizing, so I'm just curious, is there a particular reason why it's being planned around the holidays? So maybe Yves, if you want to speak to some of the context quickly again, and why it's important for us to keep mobilizing on this right up until the holidays.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I guess since September, we have experienced a really, I guess, momentum with Get 'em Done Checkpoint and their resistance to Coastal GasLink Pipeline with Slato, aka Molly Wickham, the spokesperson for Get 'em Done Checkpoint, occupying and kicking CGL off a drill site that they were CGL was trying to drill under the Witzinqua River. And so from there, it's kind of been like very, the momentum has been very strong. And so now, especially with like the raid and the arrests and them going through the Canadian court justice system, we don't want to drop the ball. And then also with the investor letter, the RBC response, and then also our response to that. So it's a really good time to keep the momentum up. I know it's the holidays. I know people, you know, some celebrate the holidays in whatever way you celebrate, or maybe you don't. But it is very important that we keep up the pressure and do what we can so that it's the excitement, or you know, some people are enraged by this. I know I am. And just want to keep it going. And then even just like a really good week of like putting on that pressure, and then we come back in the new year and see what the new year brings. So I think that's my answer to that question.
Thank you. So we have about 5 minutes left here, I think, before we round off. So I wanted to address a question from Clayton. And I might pass this to you again, Amy, if you have an answer. If you don't, I can try to give my best answer to this. But is anyone following up on the outcomes of Indigenous-led victories from a decade ago on RBC? There was a commitment from RBC to review their FPIC policies with lenders. which we never got to test because their funding dried out. So do you know anything on that? It's a tough one.
It is a tough one. I'm not really privy to RBC organizing from a decade ago, but I will say that regardless of what RBC says, especially on their website and especially in the investor letter response that they sent back to Biddenham Checkpoint, that they claim to highly value their relationships with Indigenous communities and the unique social, cultural, and historic contributions that Indigenous peoples have made in Canada. That is the biggest crap. And any statement, from them, we know is false. If they really valued these relationships, they would not be funding a destructive project that violates Indigenous sovereignty and ravages sacred headwaters through Wet'suwet'en territory. So again, they need to put their money where their mouth is. If they want to greenwash things, that's their choice, but we're going to call them out for that greenwashing when numbers don't lie, and the funding that they provide and the investments that they've made into fossil fuel companies is nothing short of a human rights abuse.
Thank you. And Eve, I see you have a hand up. Did you want to make a note on that point?
Sorry, no, not on that point, but I did want to ask something or add something just about, okay, so we have a GoFundMe link to our neighboring nation, the Gitxsan, and this is the nation that the Wet'suwet'en took Canada to court back in the 1990s. But anyways, they are right now currently holding a blockade on their territories, and they're stopping trains from passing through their territories in support of Wet'suwet'en. And so currently they've been there for like over 15 days. And there has been some arrests, and there's actually a strong RCMP presence. So there's a GoFundMe, and we're asking people to share that if you're doing actions or if you have networks that you can share their GoFundMe. Just because Biddenham Checkpoint is looking at their financial, legal fundraising costs and stuff like that. So we're asking if you can please share the GoFundMe for our amazing neighbors and relatives that are still holding it down and need that support, especially them being criminalized and harassed by RCMP. So yes, I just wanted to share that. I forgot to do that in my talk. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So I think with that, we might wrap it here since we're at the hour. I've looked through, I don't think I missed anything super burning or pressing, but if I did, feel free to reach out to me at info@thinkingonabetterfuture.org if you have any questions that you still need answered. And with that, we might kind of wrap it here. Thank you so much for coming. And we really encourage you, if you haven't yet, to fill out that form, to get signed up, and to do whatever you can with the time that we have, and knowing that it's the holidays and people are busy and it's winter and it's cold outside, but really try to push yourself to get out there and show some solidarity in whatever way you can. And I also did want to just flag really quickly that we recognize that the situation with COVID is getting potentially worse or getting a little bit more uncertain. So we really encourage you that if you're doing an in-person action, make sure that you respect public health guidelines with whatever community you live in. Wear a mask, stay distance, and just be good to each other in that way. So thank you everyone for coming. Did anybody want, any of the speakers have any last points? Anything I missed? No. All right, well, thank you everyone.